Dr. Gregory Nawalnik is a clinic assistant professor at the University of Kansas Medical Center. He also serves as a clinical director of psychology services at the University of Kansas Health System's Strawberry Hill campus. Dr. Nawalnik's roles include supervising behavioral health staff, providing clinical instruction to interns, fellows, and residents, conducting outpatient work, and offering psychological assessments both inpatient and outpatient. He is an he is also an expert witness performing forensic evaluations and testifying across Kansas. With expertise in severe mental illness, anxiety, depression, personality disorders, suicide prevention, and forensic psychology, Dr. Nawalnik is licensed to practice in both Kansas and in California. All right, Dr. Nawalnik, thank you for being here.
All right, good morning, everybody. That was a great introduction. It's like I'm not that. So it was one of those weird drive mornings that I'm like, okay, settle in after, having issues the whole way. So thanks for being here. Obviously, suicide is one of those things that it's not fun to talk about. But whenever I talk, I usually try to inject some levity whenever I can as appropriate. Also being the first one up at 8, whatever it is fun to try to get people engaged. So let's roll with this together and accept that this is going to be what it's going to be. I'm sorry, I am not Dr. Danielle Johnson, who was supposed to be giving this talk. So I spent all day yesterday as an adult psychologist, because you probably didn't hear any kid involvement in that introduction, because there is none in my life. But I got intimately acquainted with the information I'm about to share with you guys. So bear with me. I won't judge you. You won't judge me. We'll all get along. We'll get through this. All right? Cool. So what are we going to do today? It's always nice to do these objective things. You put a check mark and it's like they were going to do something. So first we want to, define and talk about what is bullying behavior. Bullying is one of those things I think in some way, shape, or form, probably every one of us has encountered, either on the receiving or the distributing end. Those of you that have been distributing, shame on you, but it's all right. We're not about shame today. And hopefully you've learned from those experiences. We don't do that anymore. It's kind of me bullying you right now. Not nice. All right. And, but it does have an impact, and we have to try to do our best to understand what that impact is, how that behavior occurs, why it occurs, and the different impacts it can have. Also, we're going to examine adolescent suicide statistics. It's not always about the numbers, but it's a little bit about the numbers. And then we're going to look at the impacts and warning signs of problematic use of social media and bullying. And we're looking at bullying both in terms of cyber and in person. So I guess it'd be traditional bullying, classic. And then identify possible responses, things that parents can do, things adolescents can do, that we can try to insulate ourselves against this, nefarious foe. So bullying is a troubling behavior. That's it. The presentation's over. Thank you, guys. Okay, so bullying was, and this is interesting to me, that it wasn't federally defined until 2014. So up until that point, I guess whatever you thought was bullying might not have officially been bullying. But as of 2014, the CDC and the Department of Education identified it as any unwanted aggressive behavior or behaviors by another youth or group of youths that are, I almost did the my cousin Vinny, 2 youths. Anyway, youths, no? All right. I noticed that my film references date me substantially, and that's not fun anymore. So anyway, who are not siblings or current dating partners. That's interesting to me, because it's like, so if you're a sibling, it's just expected. It's part of the game. And if you're dating, I don't know why that would make it different, but I guess maybe that classifies it then as something else, like domestic violence or something, instead of bullying. That involves an observed or perceived power imbalance and is repeated multiple times or is highly likely to be repeated. So, I mean, we can do a share of hands. How many people here ever were bullied at some point, some way? Look at that, brave hands. Thank you for sharing. For those of you that weren't, you'll get brave as this goes on. You'll get your hands up, because I think everyone in some way, shape, or form has experienced bullying. Oh, we're signed out. Is that on your screen too? Yeah, look at that. Well, there we go. We're back. So if you remember what bullying was like, um, it's one of those things where maybe if you played a sport, like for example, I played middle school basketball, and after the game, or after practice, you go in the locker room to change, whatever, because back in the day, that's what you did. Now I think kids just go home. But we would go in and change. And it was always a question of who was going to get a swirly or a grundy or something, wedgie, whatever. And this is kind of an important thing because there's an acknowledgement that you didn't want to be the one getting it. And so sometimes that led you to, when someone else was, you would just kind of idly sit by, if not even get involved in it, because for once it wasn't you. And that was cool. You're like, hey, it's not me. But you knew that it could come right back around again. And so every time the practice ended, you get that little kind of sick to your stomach feeling, a little anxious about wondering, is this going to happen to me? Bullying can inflict harm or distress on the targeted youths, including physical, psychological, social, and even educational harm. And I love my pictures. They're all chosen very thoughtfully. So this one, does anybody know the name of the guy in the coonskin cap? Come on. Thank you. Scott Farkas, one of the greatest bullies from film history of all time, from A Christmas Story, the guy that tormented Ralphie and all of, yeah, all right, thanks. Okay, so there are different types of bullying. Physical, which obviously just roughing someone up. Verbal, the name calling or teasing. Relational, social / reputational, which is like, the spreading rumors about people, having kind of the in click and you're on the outs. And then also damaged property. So, when somebody just takes your whatever stuff and just smashes it, that's always fun. And then the newer form, electronic or cyberbullying, which the targeting occurs through different technological means. So it can be the internet, it can be cellular phone, like text messages, and even the social media. And imagine if you get, the everyone hates you, go kill yourself text. Like that's a good time. And especially if you're already depressed, just something like that, it lines up with those depressive thoughts you're already having and makes the likelihood of moving towards suicidal thoughts that you might already be experiencing much more likely, turns up the volume on a little bit. So we don't want that. And none of the other folks featured in the pictures really seem to be enjoying their day. So let's talk numbers. Prevalence. 1 in 5 high school students reported being bullied on school property. So that's that in-person piece. 1 in 5. So each of these tables, you guys are roughly grouped in about groups of 5. So one of every one of you at the table is going to be victimized by bullying just by showing up to school. That sucks. Like that is just a self-loathing, terrible feeling where every day you wake up, you got to go back for more. And then more than 1 in 6, so somewhere between 5 and 6 in the data, school students report being bullied electronically. Now, for those of you who actually get my references, you're old enough that when you were in high school, there wasn't really electronic bullying. Shit happened at school, and then you went home, and it stayed at school until, you're going to bed and you start worrying about waking up the next day and having to go back. But you got at least a little bit of reprieve from it. There was a little bit of behind the lines from the battle. You can calm down, you can relax, you can reset. Kids nowadays, it follows them. It lives in these little fabulous things. And you've got kind of a Molotov cocktail because we know that these little things are addictive. All the different technologies, social media, the designers have acknowledged that it's been made to mirror gambling behavior. Like, look at how it works, even with Instagram. Like you pull down and hold it for a second, let go, and it starts pinwheeling. It's going to give you something new, something you didn't see the last time. Ooh, what is it? So that hits that pleasure center of our brain, makes us more likely to come back to it. Now, factor in there that somebody's going to be saying some nasty stuff about you. They're going to be hitting the same nerve that they've been picking on all day at school. Now they're actually going to have friends that, friends of theirs from other schools you don't even know that are going to see what they're doing, and they're going to then jump on dog pile and start targeting you as well. So there's a real additive property to this. But we'll get into all of that more as we go. So nearly 40% of high school students who identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual, and then 33% of those who are unsure of their sexual identity experience bullying, compared to 22% of heterosexual high school students. So what we're seeing there, information in terms of the higher likelihood of risk. 30% of female high school students experience it compared to 19% of males. That may be surprising to some of the males in the room who felt like it was always them, but it might be not surprising at all to the women who knew exactly how horrible it felt growing up in a circle of friends where there was a certain amount of cattiness and certain competitive infighting and, you know, trying to kind of claw over one another to get to the top of the social stratus. And then nearly 29% of white high school students experience bullying compared to 19% of Hispanic and 18% of Black high school students. So a lot of information there. Some of the consequences of bullying. Obviously, the physical bit, you can have physical injury, social and emotional distress, low self-esteem. You know, when you think about how we all form our sense of ourselves, you know, it starts when you're a little weeling, little tiny person, right? You've got these adults around you that you kind of look up to, you rely on for things, and it starts to form a sense of yourself. You're not like running around at 4 saying, you know, I'm Greg, I'm a Leo, I love walks on the beach, I like riding a bike, I, you know, do all the fun things, play tennis once in a while, mediocrely. No, like you just are doing what you're supposed to do. You've got kind of roadmap that you're following and you're starting to figure out who you are, what you're about. But a lot of that is derived by external messaging that you get. Starts with those big parent people or caregivers, aunties, uncles, grandparents, whatever. Then it moves into teachers, peers, friends, all these different things combined, and we start to feel some way about the messages we're getting. And if we keep getting negative messages, it's really hard to feel positively about ourselves. We start to identify as less than. We start to think that when there's a tryout or a test or whatever, that we will do a little bit worse than everybody else. When we think about going after somebody that we have a crush on, we're probably just not going to. If we try to, we expect to be, you know, upset by that. It's not going to work out. So low self-esteem, bullying just absolutely dog piles on top of all that, and it's going to magnify anything that was already there in terms of insecurity. And some of this stuff happens around this whole alpha thing. And some folks are just headstrong and they're the alpha, it's what they're going to do. And bullying, they don't mean to bully, they're just, it's my way, and this is it, you're in my way, and you're inconveniencing me. For others, it comes out of lower self-esteem for themselves. They notice that when they trip somebody and people laugh, it's like, oh, that was funny. I made people laugh. That was cool. So then they start to identify through that, or putting other people down. When other people start to laugh, it's like, hey, you become kind of de facto cool, mainly because nobody wants to mess with you and wind up getting bullied as well. But that's enough for somebody with low self-esteem. So the low self-esteem comes on both sides of bullying, on the perpetrator and the victim. Death can occur, suicidality, self-harm gone awry, and increased risk of depression, anxiety, sleep difficulties, lower academic achievement, even dropping out of school. All these things from bullying, because we get back to that habitual nature of it, the fact that it's likely to reoccur and it is going to reoccur, and that eventually at a breaking point where I just don't want to have this happen again. In terms of the consequences on the perpetrator, increased risk of substance misuse, academic problems, and some of these are also not necessarily consequences as much as characteristics of. So sometimes they may bully because they're not particularly proficient in their academic work. So they see somebody who is, it makes them feel some way and they want to go and hurt them. So it's not necessarily that their academic performance goes down because they're bullying someone, though it could be. There's an increased risk of experiencing violence later in adolescence and into adulthood. You think about it, when you start establishing behavioral patterns of interaction, those things start to get kind of hardwired. we start to know that when we don't feel right, we blow up and we hurt somebody. So there's how that's going to translate right over to adulthood. Youth who bully and are bullied themselves suffer the most serious consequences and are at the greatest risk of mental health and behavioral problems. So kind of interesting because you've got them kind of sandwiched between getting bullied and then bullying. And there's just a lot of stuff to navigate there. So let's talk suicide in youth and young adults. Statistics, again, got to hit some numbers. So ages 10 to 24 account for 15% of all suicides in the United States. And that's, that's a rough population. Those of you that are parents, have kids that are around 10, think about 10 suicide. Just heartbreaking. 7,126 deaths. So that's 11 out of 100,000 in that age range. It's the second leading cause of death for this age group. And the suicide rates for this group, and this is kind of the highlight, is that the numbers grew by 52.2% from 2000 to 2021. That is a staggering increase. That is as alarming as it gets. And everybody wants to look and why? But we keep giving these out. We keep letting people do what they think they should be doing. And oh yeah, no, Johnny got a phone. Yeah, of course you got to get a phone. You got to be cool. You can't not have the phone. So I don't think that there's a lot of accident that between 2000 and 2021, when technology took a lot of leaps in terms of an extension of ourselves, that we're seeing these numbers skyrocket. In 2021, 9% of high school students reported attempting suicide in the previous year. That's attempting, not just thinking about, but actually attempting. And it was most frequent among females, 12.4% compared to boys, 5.3%. And the data are limited on the rate of suicide in people who identify as sexual minorities. But in 21, 26.3 of the high school students identifying as lesbian, gay, or bisexual reported attempting suicide. So, I mean, it's a rate 5 times higher than those, that number among heterosexual students. And, but encouragingly, data from 2020 show the rate of self-reported suicide attempts in the prior year among sexual minorities decreased with age. So it's not that they decreased overall, but it's 5.5% at the range of 18 to 25 and 2.2% at 26 to 49. So what we're seeing there is, I think, that kind of individuation range where somebody who may be receiving critical messaging either at home, in their hometown, at school, wherever, that once they can finally kind of break free, like, when a rocket launches, there's so much, gravity pulling until it gets to a certain point where it's far enough away and it can kind of maintain a very comfortable orbit. Kind of the same thing for folks identifying as sexual minorities. It's that once they get out, they can find like-minded individuals. They can find people who share their stories. They connect. They find happiness. They find joy. They find a supportive environment, acceptance, and that's invaluable. But we've got to work harder on that 18 to 25 range, and probably even younger. So identifying the influence. So this is kind of making the connections between these two. Obviously, linking bullying and suicide. Great. So in-person bullying, the old school bullying classic, is known to raise the risk of thoughts of suicide and attempts for both victims and perpetrators. Sorry, that's where I disappeared to, because I realized if I sat up here drinking coffee the entire time, this would be a whole different talk, because I'd be like, so water's your friend. Water's good. Okay. Not that I haven't had enough coffee already this morning. So, all right. So in a 2022 study, almost 9% of 10,000 young adolescents with a mean age of 12, so that means there are some over, some younger, reported being a target of cyberbullying, and less than 1% reported perpetrating cyberbullying. But anybody who did endorse perpetrating cyberbullying also endorsed experiencing it. So it kind of shows that when we talk about cyberbullying, it's like a free for all. Like anybody can pick whichever side, attack whatever. Um, Participants who experienced cyberbullying were more than 4 times as likely to report suicidal thoughts and attempts as those who did not. That's another very alarming statistic. 4 times as likely. The association diminished a little bit, but it remained consistent when they removed other factors like family conflict, racial discrimination, parental monitoring, and feeling supported at school. Now, to be clear, the family conflict and the racial discrimination, those are adverse variables. Those are things that are going to make your likelihood of suicidal ideation increase. Parental monitoring and feeling supported at school are protective factors. Those are the variables that are going to make the likelihood decrease. So when you pull those out, the association between the cyberbullying and suicidal thoughts and attempts is a little bit weaker, but the connection is still very much there. Cyberbullying increased the risk of thoughts and attempts independent of in-person bullying. So even if you weren't experiencing in-person bullying and just cyber, it's still increasing the risk. And unlike in-person, and this is an interesting one, perpetrating cyberbullying was not linked to increased suicidal thoughts or attempts. So remember when we talked about bullying classic, the likelihood, if you're bullying people, your likelihood of suicidal thoughts things go up. With cyberbullying, it doesn't. Why do you think that is? Yeah, I'm not the only one talking this morning. You guys. The disconnect. Yeah. There's a certain arm's length of separation, right? And, you can just spray and pray wherever you want. Attack whomever, whenever. Doesn't have to be particularly personal. So, yeah, it's a rough deal. So there are a lot of complexities in looking at this. I mean, we would love to say that it's just a direct line. This is how it is. But there was a study done in 2019. It's kind of a lit review that revealed an independent and direct association found between heavy social media and internet use and increased suicide attempts in adolescents under 19 years of age. So they reviewed 7 different studies that found that or contributed to that statistic. And when they adjusted for cyberbullying victimization and sleep disturbance, it reduced the strength of the association. So again, we're seeing other things that come to play. But what I want to be clear here is heavy social media and internet use. So this isn't just the kid that, uses it a little bit here and there. This is someone who probably when they wake up in the morning, they're online doing whatever. If they're at school and they're allowed to have a device, they're hitting it all day there. When they come home, they just go straight to their room and are doing the same stuff. Like this is habitual, problematic, consistent, chronic behavior and use. And the reason I say it's complex is that then we've got 2 other studies that were reviewed that revealed that some social media and internet use versus no use was associated with fewer suicide attempts. So now we're flipping from if you've got heavy use, you've got a substantially higher risk. But if you've got no use, that's not great either. But if you've got a moderate, some use, now what's the right amount? I don't know. There's no measuring cup for internet. But the fact is, I take 2 spoonfuls of Instagram and 1 little bit of Snapchat, and then you're good. Wish it were that easy. But the fact is, I think it comes back to an old adage that I think I talked about at some point. Well, anyway, it'll show up. But all things in moderation, right? Moderation is key. We've heard that before. It's the same thing. Too much of anything is a bad thing. Dave Matthews has a great song that sugar's sugar and poison, but sugar will kill you. True story. So we have to think that even things that seem benign or can even have positive consequences and positive influence, when we do too much of it, it can be problematic. I love this picture, so I took it and stuck it in there. So there's significant heterogeneity in how social media and internet use is being classified in current research. So what that means in lay speak is all the different researchers are doing it differently. So it's hard to come to a single solid smoking gun, here's the answer. Current evidence suggests a weak independent association between social media and internet use and suicide risk in adolescents, but the direction of the effect requires further investigation, and as well as more consistent monitoring of co-founders such as cyberbullying. So we don't want to just say it's just the internet. We have to look at when cyberbullying enters the chat. Look what I did. And recognize that that's going to have an influence, and that there are different confounding variables that just muck up the works when we're trying to do research to come up with a direct, relation. So that's not to say, when it says a weak connection, it's not saying there's no connection. And this is stuff that if you're looking at the data out there, it's all pretty recent, almost really driven since the pandemic. And I think that's not accidental, because where did everybody go when everybody was locked up at home? Online. Come on, work with me here. So, and that was a rough deal. When you've got everybody feeling disconnected, technology provided the connection. So what we really did there was like supercharge the addictive nature of online presence. It's a terrible deal, and we're going to talk a little bit about the neuroanatomy associated with it. But hang on. And then there's also evidence of positive or supportive effects of internet use. So again, this is that kind of tipping point. Like, where's the right amount? What's the wrong amount? What's too much? What's too little? We're trying to find that Goldilocks zone of internet and social media use. It exists. We just don't know where it is yet. So this is an interesting thing I found out there. So you wouldn't, how many parents in the room? Wow, it's a lot of you. Way to go. Okay. So how many of you, when something, needs to be done in the house, you just tell your kid, go get the drill and just go to work on it? You'll figure it out. No hands, right? Oh, there you go. You got it. Okay, good for you. That's advisable. It's not. Okay, sorry. With all due respect, that's fair, but still, I think a little bit of instruction goes a long way. We don't just say, here you go, and expect them to wing it. We want to show them this is how you do it, and then we trust them to do it. They can go get the power tool, do whatever, once we know they know how to use it. That's the point I'm making. So when I say we, parents, not me, just give cellular devices to their kids. They give technology to their kids at earlier and earlier ages, and they expect them to wing it. And they don't understand how nefarious, how insidious this device can be. They just look at it as the kid's been whining about it. All their friends have it. They know everybody else has it. They seem fine. So they give them the phone. Shut the kid up. Sorry, sometimes we do that. That's parenting. Shut the kid up. It's not nice. But with squeaking wheel gets the grease, right? It's that. So the problem is with smartphones, there's a lot of things that come with it. Horribly unhealthy comparison to others. Fear of missing out. FOMO. What's up? Doom scrolling. How many people in this room doom scroll? It happens. Yeah, you don't have to raise your hand. I wasn't going to call you out, but thank you. I appreciate the honesty. I love that we're coming together. We're in the nest here. This is good. Cyberbullying, and then reputational sabotage. You've got kids that play sports or do dance or do whatever. That it's a form of themselves. It's them forming an identity. They work hard at it. It just takes one little jerk to make some critical comment, because there's already inherent insecurity in certain age ranges that now, even though they work so hard, now for some kids that are totally set in who they are and they know, they just let it slide off. But if you're somebody that's just a little not so sure, not super comfortable with where you are with things, one little comment can be the bar that goes against everything else. It tips the scales. It's not appropriately weighted. And so as a parent, you would do anything to try to insulate against that. And we don't realize that sometimes we're literally providing the gateway for that to come crashing right into our kid that we've supported through years and years of, just difficulty and growth and learning, beautiful moments. And so I'm going to go back to the phone. So there's something else that I talk about sometimes in the adult world around parenting, which is Um, so how many people here lived in the times when there was one corded telephone in the kitchen? There you go. There you go. I love you people. You're my people. And that cord, what did it look like? It was, yeah, there you go. That's always yep. It was twisted as hell. And it was pretty long because people got tired of having to be right there. Like this way you could take it. And like, so let's say you're a kid, you get a call from your little crush, you're like, oh my God, you would take that as far as you could get. And maybe it's over here by the couch and like nobody's there. You just sit down. Yeah, I miss you too. Uh, I hate everything. I just want to be with you. Uh, right? That happened. It's just me. Anyway, you had a little bit of privacy, but not much. And when that phone rang, anybody in the household could answer it, right? And God, did you hate it when you would hear it and you were in the back of the house and you would sprint like Usain Bolt to get to that phone and your parent would answer it or a sibling and it's your crush with their little cute voice. Hi, is Tommy there? Yeah. Oh, hang on. Who's speaking? Right? And it was just like you would be mortified. Just like, no, please give me the phone. So it sounds great, right? For those of you young folk in the world. But the thing is, what we miss about that is how many different skills were taught and learned by this one device that are gone now. They're the dinosaur now. And what I mean by that is, if you wanted to talk to your booth A or whatever, or want to make plans with some friends, and you went to go get the phone, and your mom or dad were on the phone, you were not going to be able to make that call until they were done. And you would assess who it was, like, is it a friend of them? No? Oh, it's work? Oh, God. Oh, she's got a notepad? And you had to delay gratification. You had to sit with something called frustration tolerance. You had to tolerate the frustration of not getting what you wanted right in that moment. You had to curb your impulse because you wanted to tell them, get off the phone, but you could not. You also learned emotion regulation. All these things in psychology add up to something known as ego strength. It's an antiquated concept from psychodynamic psychology that I love deeply. Because if you have these different abilities, these discrete skills, you will be a better human being. You will be able to tolerate disaster. The different things that seem like they're landslides that are eroding everything you've got in your world, you realize, really, maybe not so bad. I can get through this. I've gotten through it before. It's going to be okay. These things right here wiped out something that old long core device taught us. Now, we don't have to have impulse control. I want to know something, I'm going to know it now. It used to be you want to look something up, you had to go find the World Book, encyclopedia on the shelf, wherever the hell that was, right? Ooh. And if you looked it up and it wasn't there, how am I going to know this? Like you had to go talk to some people. You had to go to the library. You had to move yourself to do the things. You had to wait and you had to put in effort. And then you had at the end of it a sense of accomplishment. I did that. I figured that out. How many people get a sense of accomplishment when they Google something? Nope. We usually get frustrated. No, that's not what I said. That's not it. No, look at right? That happens. We also, it's just so many different things that got lost in technology. Now, look at the pandemic. It did allow us to stay connected. There is value in technology. There is value in social media when used the right way, when used appropriately. I recently went to a conference in Philly, saw a friend of mine there from college that I haven't seen in over 17 years. But I felt like I see him all the time because we're always in this group chat, a bunch of us on Instagram, just sharing, football stuff, everything we would have talked about back in the day. Now we're doing it there. And I literally feel very connected. So we picked up right where we left off. That's great. That's a good thing. But then also there's sometimes I'll see a tennis post and somebody put a thing out there where they're like, oh, who's in the wrong? And there's a point, and like, you know, it's like, why'd you frame it that way? There's nobody who's in the wrong. They both played the point as best they could in that moment. And somebody had to come for me. Well, you obviously never played tennis in your life and you don't know it. I'm like, I'm glad you feel the need to do that. Like, what are you doing? You don't know me. You don't know my life. You don't know my story. You come for me. So of course I didn't launch back into it. I went on with my life because I'm 48 years old and I have a life. Unlike the jerk who's looking to pick apart a comment and try to discourage conflict. Instead, they're trying to bring the conflict in. So that's an adult with a fully formed prefrontal cortex. I'm better equipped than a child to manage this stuff. But the same things happen. Oh, and believe me, my blood boiled when I read it. But then I did a little deep breathing, and I thought about, what am I going to do? What's going to happen here? How's this going to go? I'm not going to do this. So what can we do? Knowing what we know about all this, right? Everybody wants to answer, what do we do? So number one, the data indicates that parents' awareness of their child's online presence and activity is protective. That's a protective factor. Now, some parents are going to bristle at this and say, I think that Johnny needs his autonomy. He needs his independence. I want to support that. Okay. Well, it'd be nice if Johnny's, alive to have his independence and his autonomy. It's nice that Johnny is able to engage in his life without being cripplingly depressed or anxious. It's nice that Johnny actually feels like he can come and talk to you about the hard things, about the big feelings. And it's also nice for Johnny to be able to come and say, look at this jerk, what they just said. Can you believe this? Johnny, thumbs up on that one. Adolescents' perception that parents understood their problems, monitored their academic and leisure time activities, and respected their privacy. So see, there is a boundary. This isn't helicopter enmeshment. This isn't, I'm wherever you go, there I am. Let's go. Here we go. Oh, we have to practice. Okay. I'm going to watch practice the whole thing. Okay, you're done. Okay, come on, let's go. Now we're going to go home. Oh, do you want to talk to Tommy? Okay. Hi, Tommy. Like, no, we don't need that. It doesn't have to be that. We can give space. We can respect space and privacy, but just not carte blanche, wide open doors. We have to have, and sorry, I didn't finish that. It's found to have a protective effect. We want to do all the things that we can that are protective. Had a talk this morning with a colleague who's a child psychologist with the health system because I thought it was a good idea to consult in this situation. And he was saying that one of the things I'm probably going to get asked about that I wouldn't have known, because my kids don't have phones, so I don't need to know this yet, is that there are a plethora, sorry, three amigos anyway. All right, anyway, would you say there are a plethora of apps? Yes, guapo, there's a plethora of apps. Anyway, there are a ton of apps out there that vary in their level of restriction and the different things you can restrict and monitor for your kid's phone. I think like one he said was Family 360. He said there's something else that Google has that's great and it's free, but it's only for Android platform right now. But basically you can, and there's some that like they go all the way from, they'll send you every text that the kid ever sends or receives. That might be a bit more than I need. But there's some, and this is where AI that I don't like AI, but maybe some of it's not so bad. There's AI, integration that will detect anything around bullying, stuff that identifies or flags as bullying messages, or self-harm indicative or suicidal driven or super depressive messaging that will alert you to that. Does that seem valuable? Does that seem like information that when you're at the morgue identifying your kid that you would want to have known, that could have helped to avoid being in that terrible damn self-loathing moment? Information is power. Knowledge is key. We have to use this stuff. And the effect of parent-adolescent relationship on suicidal behavior is stronger in girls than boys. Ding, ding, ding. That's a real key because of the data we saw earlier. where females are at much greater risk than males. So if we know right here, I'm giving you the tool you need. The parent-adolescent relationship is stronger in terms of positive impact in girls and boys. So there's the tool. That's what you need. And when it comes to social media, becoming tech savvy as parents serves as a protective variable. Because if I've had one of these conversations with other parent friends of mine, I've had 1,000, where they say, I don't even know why I'd use that because I know they're going to know how to turn it off anyway. They're so tech savvy. Well, then why aren't you, moron? Like maybe, oh my God, is it worth putting in a little bit of effort? Can you not Google? Do your thumbs not work to look this stuff up? Find the answers. It's worth it. So we have to be willing to put in the work before we just hand the loaded gun or power tool to our kid and say, have at it. You'll figure it out. You probably already know better than me how to use it. So awareness is really the key of this. So we have to look at, knowing the difference in gender, knowing what adolescent females have been dealing with in terms of they experience sexual violence. They've just come out of a mass disabling and life-altering pandemic, objectification of their body, misogyny, weight stigma. There's so much different shit. I swore I wasn't going to do it. I just got a talking to yesterday about that too. So please don't, let's keep that between us. Anyway, adolescents are trying to manage difficult relationships and peers suggesting self-harm. When I did a 6-month stint out of Marillac in between the psychologists out there, so see, I have had child experience. Every one of them that engaged in self-harm behavior, I asked the same question: where'd you learn that? And they would sit and look at me and go, what do you mean? So where'd you learn to do that? And they were stunned. No one had ever asked this before, but they all had the answer. Oh, my stepmom, I watched her, she did it. Oh, my one friend does it. Oh, this other friend said I should try it. This one did that. They're learning, and none of them were learning from their actual parents. They could have learned better things from their parents. And so, academic social pressures, negative home environments, poor access to mental health care without fully developed brains. The brain develops from bottom and back to front. The prefrontal cortex, this front bit up here, this is the part that makes us adults. It's responsible for executive functioning, which is all those things I mentioned earlier: impulse control, emotion regulation, delayed gratification, planning and scheduling, recognizing that and curbing those impulses. Those aren't there until somewhere between 20 and 25 across both genders, earlier in females and males typically. So we have to understand that in some ways we have to, as parents, serve as that external prefrontal cortex for our children. We have to recognize that they're not equipped in the way that they would optimally be to handle a lot of this stuff. And so, now we have to use what we know. That's the moderation. I bet not. Yeah, that's fair. I thought that said something different when I put it on there. Oh well. So it's important for parents and providers, any providers in the room, to be aware of the information that's available, which is that we need to screen for cyberbullying in the same way that we would look for other factors like depression or family conflict. We need to be looking for the warning signs and asking the right questions. You're not going to get the right answers if you don't ask the right questions, if you don't know how to come at this stuff. And we've learned that social media and the internet in moderation can be a preservative factor. It can help. But when it's excessive, then we get all the bad things, negatively impacting sleep, which is super important for brain development and neurogenesis and development. Excessive online activity really negatively impacts the sense of self and identity. And it can lead to these unfair comparisons. During the pandemic, a lot of adolescents really went downhill because they saw influencers who were still traveling. And they're like, look, I'm at this resort. I'm all by myself. Yeah, because you shouldn't have been there, moron. But it made them feel like, Mom, Dad, why aren't we going? We should go. And no. And it's this unfavorable comparison. Like my life, I'm not cool. I don't get to do all the cool things. There's so much stuff out there now. And I love some of the accounts that'll do like the honest things, like this is how I really look. And then they'll show like how they edit it to look. I want to be edited. That would be cool. But instead, I'm me. Um, so anyway, in closing, unfortunately, bullying still around. Uh, Moderation is the key. I think that's a big takeaway. And there are opportunities for screening for providers and even parents to just ask questions, engage. Even if your kid seems like they couldn't be more bothered by you, don't stop, keep engaging. Don't helicopter, don't do that thing, but you know. And consider getting one long cord wall phone for your kitchen. No, but it's important that we're setting boundaries. We need to, you know, like if your kid has a phone, it's okay to set 7 o'clock, phones come here, they go in the lockbox, that's it. And you can model this stuff. We have to accept the influence of social learning, that our kids watch us do things. So the do what I do, not do what I say, not what I do thing, that doesn't work. They're smarter than that. We look like idiots when we do that. And we're giving them the message that this is exactly what mom and dad do. And even when we say things like, it's work, well, then maybe your work-life barrier could use a little checkaroo. And communicate, caring, and accept all the developmental hurdles. You know, when you, as a parent, you see the time warp that a childhood and adolescence really are. It's crazy. And so it's so fleeting that if you can put up a little more effort, it's going to be gone soon. So be present. Do all that. It's my dumpster fire. All right. So thank you guys. Any questions that I may or may not be able to answer? Yep. I'm not aware, but I'm sure that somebody's looking at it somewhere.
Perhaps I don't know. I will drop that.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's also concerning because I mean, I think I saw a thing recently that the #1 career when people were asked in a poll, like kids, of like, what do you want to be when you grow up? An influencer. Yeah, I heard a kid the other day say, I want to be a YouTube gamer. I'm like, really? That's the thing? Like, come on. So yeah, I mean, I'll say that there are a bunch of people looking at a bunch of things. There's going to be a bunch of research and data coming out in all this area because this is a very important conversation. It's a very important area of research. And I think that when we look at the sort of disingenuous, shallow lifestyle of an influencer, it's not a surprise that depression or anxiety could come in because you've got someone with a not fully developed prefrontal cortex out there with more money than sense, and the pressure of the comparison. Like they've put themselves on the stage that most high school kids want no part of. But now they're looking, it's like, I want everybody to look at me. And they don't realize how critical, like how many people are lobbing attacks over and over and over because human nature would love to tear stuff down, build it up to tear it down, to then maybe in 15 years bring it back again. It's rough. Anyway, you. No, you're good. Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go.
So one of the thoughts that I was having as I was listening to you talk about this kind of balance between too much social media and enough social media, there's not a measuring cup. The Trevor Project Youth Mental Health Survey, I think, often points out that folks who have an LGBTQIA identity can find online spaces to be fulfilling, right? That there can be some community, some connection there. And so I'm wondering if y'all at the health system kind of talk about how do you have discussions around social media as far as maybe community building and connection, which we do know is protective, versus some of these other factors that you've talked about?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I meant to have that in here somewhere. But yeah, one of the reasons that the internet is positive is that they're able to connect with people. Like kind of when I talked about the individual that's growing up in kind of a sheltered, more, judgmental circle, that once they can make it out to that adult phase, they find like-minded individuals and they feel validated, they feel accepted, they feel loved. That they can find that in an online platform earlier. And so, yeah, I obviously have to acknowledge again, I don't work with kids, but I know Dr. Draghi and Doctors Draghi and Johnson, they do. And when I talked to Tyler this morning, he was talking about the importance of linking to different resources and different, online, basically group meetup things where they can find sort of positive, supportive feedback. And so, yeah, that's a great point. So it's not just about the number; it's also about what are you doing with the time that you're online. Yeah. Yep. Sorry, Heidi. I'm trying to pick them as far spaced out as possible, so you have to run across. Do the Donahue. No, nobody knows Donahue.
You were talking about frustration tolerance and ego strength and delayed gratification, and you were talking about the reasons we don't have those. Do you have good resources for eliciting that information to these young people?
If I did, I'd be a lot better at what I do, probably. I think that a lot of it comes from awareness of these things and the importance of them. But I think I don't know of specific resources to help to develop those things. I probably should. But I think that simply awareness of that they exist, number one, and their importance in terms of developmental hurdles, I think they're great. And the other part that's hard is that to some extent, you are having to, as a kid, Herculeanly, that's a word, just made that neologism up, sort of heroically work without the actual cognitive tools it takes to do a lot of those things. So I think it's just about being exposed to opportunities to, tolerate frustration. And I think sometimes delaying gratification, it's just helpful. Like if you've got the ability or the means to buy whatever your kid wants in a moment, being able to say, hey, look, let's look at what you can do to earn that. That's a great tactic, because you can say, look, I'll get it for you, but I want you to buy it. You're going to earn it. And here's how. And work with them collaboratively. That causes them to think, to plan, and to set a goal and then attain it. That's the kind of thing that wash, rinse, repeat. The more often we could be doing that sort of thing. And in the moment when they're frustrated about not getting the thing, help them sit with that. I know it's hard. I know it sucks. I remember when I wanted Voltron when I was a kid. I still don't have a Voltron. It was cool. And all the 5 cats, and you put them together, and there's that big thing with the head. That is cool. The sword was huge. I don't have that. I still don't. So, yeah, I'm okay. Not still carrying that with me.
All right, we have time for one more question. Anybody else?
Aha. Oh. Hi. Nice to see you.
I noticed that whenever the suicide increased in 2021, I was wondering if a lot of that didn't have to do with the pandemic. Not so much with the social media aspect of it, but not being able to interact with friends more. Maybe they were just stuck more on the social media. But I wondered if that didn't have a big influence on the younger population and suicide, because you need that human contact and socialization, one-on-one, getting out.
Yeah. So first of all, the increase wasn't just in 2021. It was across the 20 years from 2002 to 2021. I'm sure there probably was a little blip, on top of that pushed a little higher in 21. And I do think that the more that we rob kids of the ability to be in person and actually face-to-face interact and connect over different activities and things, and instead we're telling them, here, go into this, look at this box, and here's your friend, that's going to have impacts, because we're not getting the richness of communication, especially if you're doing text messages. How many people here have ever sent a text that got completely misinterpreted because of tone? You know, I mean, or punctuation. Like, anybody see the Patrick Mahomes thing? Like, where he said, "I hate that man," but forgot the comma, and so it looked like "I hate that man" instead of "I hate that comma man." Big difference. Same words. So, and also, I think in this generation where like they try to use less letters to spell things, I mean, like there's a lot of stuff that's going to get lost in communication in terms of text type communication. So yeah, nothing's going to be as good as the real deal being in person. And I think there are certainly impacts of that. And I think we're still going to see ripples of it going forward. You know, we're removed from the pandemic, as how many people here know somebody has COVID right now? Yep, there we go. But it's not as impactful. We're still out doing things. Here we are in a room together. That's great because it sucks online. But we're still seeing the impacts. And I think any mental health providers in the room know exactly how swamped we are, slammed we are. So yeah, wheels continue to fall off. Dumpster fire burns on.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Nawalnik.
Thanks, guys.